Okay, these aren't just soda bottles. These are hostile indigenous infantry who do not want to make negotiations with us. And they got curved swords. Well, guess what? I got a curved sword of my own. Let's see what I can do here. Hello everyone, my name is Mike. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel today. If you are revisiting, if this is the first time coming by, also thank you so much. What you just saw was me having some backyard cutting fun with this sword. And as you can see in the title down below, it is of course the 1796 British Light Cavalry Sabre by Windlass Steelcrafts. Now, for those who are sword enthusiasts or people who enjoy backyard cutting and are collectors, or someone who just really loves military sabers of the 18th and 19th century, this is a very important and cool sword. This particular model is highly lusted after and admired by antique sword collectors, and you can find originals of the 1796 on the market. There's plenty. However, they are very expensive. And up until this point, there really hasn't been a manufacturer that has, I would say, produced a good functional reproduction of the sword. And by good, I mean something that represents how the sword really feels and what it is capable of. The ones that are available have been, grossly incorrect in terms of their weight and their mass distribution, but most importantly, their dimensions in all aspects of the sword. And they don't really represent what the sword feels like. Now, the models that I'm thinking of are there's a version by Topeka, there's one by Universal Swords, and the one that most people are familiar with is the cold steel version of the 1796. Now, I did a review of that sword here on this channel about 2 years ago, and you can find that down in the library here for my channel. You can go check that out. I think it was a pretty good review, but it was kind of old, and I had a pretty favorable opinion of the cold steel version of this sword. I did make some observations about the way it handled, and this is actually what I said about that sword in a hand-to-hand conflict. I'm just saying it's not handling like the original, and I think they made that compromise based on durability. If it's thicker up here, it's less likely to bend, it's less likely to break, and they know that their customers are gonna abuse the crap out of these swords. Whether or not I think it's worth your money, I actually do. And the reason is, it's very affordable, and until someone comes on the market and makes a 1796 Light Cavalry Sabre that is proportionally just like the originals, this is a very good option to have if you want to enjoy the features and aspects of this type of sword, and use it to just have some fun doing some cutting and get into. So the cold steel sword is one that, if you wanted this particular model of sword, you wanted to take it out in your backyard and cut stuff, that was the one to get, because it was durable and good enough to do backyard cutting. However, at the time that I made that video, I had not handled an original version of this sword. Few months after I made that video, I attended an antique fair where there was a gentleman selling, he had a military antique weapon dealer like tent, and he had 2 examples of the 1796. So I was able to handle them, swing them around. The guy was very nice, explained to me a lot about them, and I got my hands on an original. And what I realized right away was, wow, they do not feel like the cold steel version at all. In fact, they feel much better. And by better, I mean they were nimble, comfortable, easy to move, and the cold steel version, well, simply wasn't. So it was kind of a bummer. I ended up selling my cold steel version of the sword, and that's pretty much it. You know, you fast forward to today, and what we have now is a very good reproduction of the sword. And this is, like I said, it's produced by Windlass Steelcrafts, but it was produced in conjunction with Matt Easton of Schola Gladiatoria. Now, as you guys probably know, or if you don't know, Matt Easton is a sword dealer or antique sword dealer and a HEMA instructor and an expert, but his primary his primary experience in antique swords is with British military sabers. He is a British dude himself, and he provided Windlass Steelcrafts with an original example of the sword, and they made a one-to-one copy of it and then put it into production. And I guess they went through a few prototypes. Matt critiqued them, and they got the dimensions and pretty much everything correct with this model right here. They did a production run, an initial one which sold out, and this one here is part of the second production run that they did, and I was able to get my hands on one, and boy am I glad that I did. Now this is going to be my review of this sword, and spoiler alert, this is a good one, guys. Very, very good. Now let's start here at the hilt portion of the sword, because this is actually quite important. I didn't realize how wrong the cold steel version was until I handled an original, and they got this right here. So first of all, starting at the pommel area of the sword, it is peened, and you know, I don't know if you can see, there is a peen mark right, come on, focus, right there. And the peen is done, you know, basically just like the originals. You know, you can make out where it is. The shape of the grip is in fact correct, but more importantly than the actual shape, because the cold steel shape was very similar, the size is correct. One thing I noticed about previous replicas of this sword, or I should say reproductions, is that they get the grip size wrong. The grip is way too big on the cold steel sword, and that makes it actually quite uncomfortable when swinging it. Now, what I noticed right away when having one that is historically accurate is that it's very important that this grip is not too big, because it is a forward weighted sword, and when you're swinging it, if there's a lot of movement in the grip area, your edge alignment is going to be off. But they got that right, and this is actually the correct size. The languettes here, or these ears as they're known, are peened through correctly, just like the original, and they are, like I said, everything is the appropriate size. And like, it's one of the first things I noticed when I got this sword, was just how nice the grip is and how good it feels compared to the cold steel version. And you know, they used pretty good leather. It is, you know, there's cord underneath and then bound in leather, just like the original. All the dimensions are correct, and as I understand it, this portion here, the back strap is the correct size and shape. They got a spot for the sword knot right there, and yeah, it's just amazingly comfortable. And I think so much so because I handled the cold steel version before this. Now moving up, just gonna take the take it out of the scabbard. Just bear with me 1 second, guys. Moving up to the handguard, it is awesome. It's like the exact same size, pretty much the exact same shape. Some of the originals would have a little bit of variety in the handguard. However, the languettes are the correct size. They are in the right position, and it's just the perfect size, or I should say the most historically accurate size, and the back strap is historic as well in terms of, you know, how it is represented here. And the feel of this grip is just so nice. It really gives you a good sense of control with this sword, which is something that I totally felt that I lacked with the, or I should say the cold steel version totally lacked, was control. My hand would move all over the place when swinging that sword, and it would mess up the edge alignment. Now, there did come with a leather washer, which I guess the originals did have. And then moving on to the blade, which is where this thing really, really shines. Although I don't want to take away how important it is that they got the grip correct, because that does make a huge difference in the way the sword handles. The blade is historically accurate. They got all of the proportions correct. They got the length correct. They got the depth of fuller and size of the fuller correct. They got the hatchet tip size correct. The size of the hatchet tip, which is this portion here of the blade, did vary in originals. Like some were very wide, some weren't so wide. From what I understand of this particular model, it represents kind of like the average of what one of these would be like. And most importantly here, we have proper distal taper. And I'm smiling because this is the key to the handling of this particular sword. I mean, just look at that distal taper. What we have here is, let's see, it was like 8.6 millimeters down here at the base. It's like 8.6, 8.7. And then it tapers quite drastically almost right away. And then it thins out. Like I said, this is what they call a complex distal taper. And right up to behind the 1.8 millimeters or 1.7 millimeters at the tip. And that is historically accurate. And that makes a whole world of difference when handling this sword. It comes alive in your hand. I will say that, you know, this is a cavalry sword, so it is a heavier, beefier sword. However, if you've handled the cold steel version or any of the other cheaper made non-historically accurate versions, they handle very sluggishly, and just they're very cumbersome. They don't move well, they don't stop well, they don't accelerate well, and then they're very hard to control. This is like the complete opposite. It is very lively in the hand, very easy to control. It does take some strength to maneuver it well, and that is because it is a heavy cavalry sword, but you know, it is just incredibly nimble, especially, like I said, if you've handled one of the other versions, reproductions that are out there on the market. It's made of good steel. I believe this is 1080 high carbon steel, and it's held up very, very well. The edge is super, super sharp. I did keen it up a little bit. I didn't spend too much time on it, but it came very sharp. All I did was run one of my stones on it that I have, and it's extremely sharp, and it cuts very, very well. It's like the maneuverability of the sword and the way you are able to accelerate it into the cut is just something that you could not do with the other versions. And you really get a good idea, or I should say the correct idea of what the sword would have been like to wield in combat, which would have been very good. Now, very thin behind the edge up here in the cutting portion of the blade, and you can feel it just pass through targets, no problem. And, you know, as you can see by the cutting footage, well, didn't even feel that. Problem. Let's try another one of these cuts. simply lunging forward to get my cut in. It's like effortless. A little bit of tearing right there, but pass through easily. Basically just using your wrist. Right? Okay, let's try something a little bit more dynamic, like guard, cut, guard. Look at that. There's still water in it. Well, so much for my yard barrel. It really struck it hard, man. The interesting thing is I didn't even really feel it through the sword. Yeah, that kind of sucks. Also struck the stump right here. It just really had no problem. Most of those cuts I did not even feel passing through the target. It was very, very effortless and just nice feeling. And man, what a difference in cutting with this as compared to the cold steel version. Now, I'm not really shitting on the cold steel version. You know, that sword, you know, it's a decent sword if you want to get something like this and get out in the backyard and just whack stuff around. But if you want to understand how the sword actually felt, and that's important to you as a collector or a practitioner, then this is the way to go, man. I mean, it is really quite impressive that this is actually a thing now, and I hope Windlass continues to do more military sabers that are historically accurate, because they are out there. They just have to get a hold of the antiques and copy them. But it is a hard thing to do because these are complex weapons. So yeah, fantastic sword, guys. I really, really love it. I'm just completely thrilled with it. It puts a smile on my face every time I hold it. I have done tons of cutting with this sword, and it's just, it never gets old now. Now, I will give a couple of points of criticism on this sword that I think, you know, could be better, but keeping in mind that this is a $370 or $380 sword, it's not super expensive, but it is definitely more expensive than the other reproductions that are out there. But there are some flaws with it that I think could be better. First of all, it is, if you look down the flat, it is very, very ripply, which doesn't really bother me all that much because originals were. However, there is more than necessary, I think, waviness in the spine. You know, that's more of an aesthetic thing. It doesn't really affect the function of the sword at all. But, you know, if you've seen originals, they're pretty pristine in how straight they are along the spine. And this one's not too bad, but you definitely can see a little bit of waviness. And if you look down along the edge, you can see it wavers a little bit as it's approaching the cutting portion of the edge. Not really a big deal. Like I said, I didn't notice anything in terms of how it cuts. It just cuts like a laser, but that's a little bit, I think, of quality control that Windlass can, in fact, improve on. The other thing is I've heard, and I didn't have that experience with this one, but some of the grips are not aligned with the blade all that well. And that's an experience that I didn't have with mine here, but this one is pretty straight. Everything lines up rather nicely. The back strap, the blade, the handguard. However, I've heard and I've seen from other videos that this portion is, you know, all out of line and whatnot on many different versions. So I think you're going to find some quality control issues with the sword, so be on the lookout for that if that's something. But honestly, this is such a huge step in the right direction for functional military sabers and just functional swords in general, that they really paid attention to the actual proportions, weight, distal taper, and mimicked it 100%. And that is just such a cool, exciting thing for somebody who's into swords like me, and I'm sure you. So kudos to Matt Easton, kudos to Windlass Steelcrafts for doing this. And this has just been such an amazing cutting experience. And oh man, as a collector and enthusiast, I am thrilled. I didn't mention the weight of this particular sword. It is, mine weighed in at 858 grams, which is like spot on how these things weighed in at the original ones. So yeah, awesome. I do want to mention the scabbard real quick. This is a very good scabbard. This is historically accurate. I've seen the original scabbard, and it looks exactly like this. They got the brazing correct. Everything on it is just very, very well done. And, you know, there is a, you know, this is what they had, a nice beefy metal scabbard. It's loud. It's got these rings. It's very well made, and it looks just like the original did. So I'm very, very psyched about it. I guess there is a plastic liner in here which can sort of shift around and sometimes makes it a little bit difficult to get the blade in there, but that doesn't really bother me. It might bother some people. I really don't care all that much, as long as the scabbard is of decent quality and protects the sword blade and holds it. I'm cool with it. Just keep in mind that this is a metal throat piece right here. So when drawing and sheathing the sword, try to keep the edge away from rubbing up against that, because that will dull the blade, which is also historically accurate. That actually happened. Yeah, I'm just absolutely thrilled, guys. I love this sword, and I highly recommend it. Highly recommend you guys try to get one of these. They're sold out right now, I think, pretty much everywhere, and for good reason, and that is because they're just amazing cutters and just awesome, historically accurate 1796s. Finally. I do want to mention one more thing. I know some people had some complaints or criticism of the first production run, that the blades were a little floppy. Mine, sorry guys, I put this thing down again. Mine actually is not really that floppy at all. And it has, you know, good flex. As you can see, it's flexing in the right portion. This bottom portion of the blade is staying dead straight, and it's flexing up in the cutting portion of the blade. And yeah, I didn't notice floppiness with my version at all. I actually think it's perfect stiffness, and you know, the spring tempering is great. Springs right back into position. So they may have rectified that floppy issue with the second run, because this one here is I think perfect balance between flex and stiffness for one of these, and I thought it was great. And it does, I don't know if you guys can hear that, have a good ring when you cut through stuff with a very nice edge alignment and whatnot. It just makes a beautiful sound. So yeah, psyched with this sword, guys. Pick one up if you can, if you like military sabers. This is a great addition to your collection, and a great practitioner's tool as well. This is going to get so much more cutting out of me. So thank you so much for coming by, guys. 100% greatly appreciated. Please leave comments, a like, subscribe. I love talking to people about swords, and let me know if you have one of these and what you think. And yeah, till next time, stay safe, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.